Ethan Carter stepped out of the sleek black limousine, the golden glow of the city lights reflecting off the polished glass windows. As he adjusted his cufflinks, the platinum watch on his wrist caught the soft interior light, a subtle reminder of the life he had built, successful, structured, and untouchable. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, an evening at the most exclusive restaurant in town with his new partner, Sophia Bennett. Sophia, poised and radiant in a shimmering evening gown, looped her arm through his as they entered. The restaurant exuded elegance, with towering glass windows offering a breathtaking view of the skyline. Every detail, from the crisp white linens to the ambient lighting, was designed to impress. Sophia glanced at the menu, her voice light with excitement. "Do you think they have truffle risotto? I've been craving it all week." Ethan chuckled, nodding. "If they don't, I'll make sure they do. Tonight we celebrate. Nothing's off the table." As he scanned the room, his gaze landed on a familiar figure across the restaurant. For a moment, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. But there she was, Lena Sullivan, his ex-wife, and she was pregnant. The sight hit him like a punch to the gut. Memories crashed over him in waves, late-night conversations, whispered dreams, and the pain of their final goodbye. Ethan's grip tightened around the edge of the table as a rush of emotion surged through him. Regret, guilt, an aching sense of something lost. Sophia, perceptive as ever, caught the shift in his demeanor. "Ethan?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. He forced a smile, but his mind was elsewhere. Lena's presence stirred questions he wasn't prepared to face. Was she happy? Who was the father? And why did seeing her now feel like a second chance he never knew he needed? Their eyes met across the room for a fleeting second before she looked away, her expression unreadable. She moved gracefully, despite the undeniable weight of exhaustion on her face. Even after all this time, she carried herself with the quiet strength that had drawn him to her in the first place. A waiter approached their table, but Ethan barely registered his words. His appetite had vanished. Sophia, still oblivious to the storm brewing inside him, carried on about their upcoming trip, the latest art piece she wanted for their penthouse. But Ethan couldn't focus. His mind was trapped in the past, and for the first time in years, the present felt less certain than ever. As the night wore on, Ethan realized something unsettling. His world, the one he had meticulously built, suddenly felt incomplete. And somewhere across the room, in the glow of the dim restaurant lights, was the missing piece he had long since let go. Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction as he leaned back in his chair. Tonight wasn't just about celebrating another business milestone, it was about cementing his place at the top. Success, after all, was best enjoyed with the right company, in the most exclusive settings. The soft hum of conversation, the glimmer of candlelight on polished glass, and the stunning skyline view made everything feel perfect. Or at least it did, until she walked in. As he scanned the menu, movement from the corner of his eye caught his attention. A waitress wove through the restaurant, her steps practiced, yet weary. At first, she was just another staff member blending into the background, but then she turned toward his table. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Lena. Her hair, once silky and cascading down her back, was now pulled into a simple ponytail. She wore a black blouse and apron, a far cry from the elegant dresses he used to see her in, but it was her face that struck him the hardest. Though tired, framed by faint shadows beneath her eyes, there was still a glow about her, a quiet resilience he'd always admired. It took him only seconds to notice the change that made his heart lurch. She was pregnant. A rush of emotions surged through him, an overwhelming mix of shock, guilt, and something deeper, something unspoken. The woman who had once been his world now carried a life he knew nothing about. His stomach twisted. "Good evening." Lena's voice was steady, professional. She stood at the edge of their table, holding a small notepad, her eyes carefully neutral. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Sophia, completely unaware of the storm brewing between them, smiled brightly. "I'll have a glass of your best Chardonnay." Ethan's throat was dry. He struggled to find his voice, his mind scrambling to process the woman in front of him with the memories he had spent years trying to bury. Finally, he managed. "Water. Sparkling." Lena jotted the order down without hesitation, her expression unreadable. But just for a moment, so brief that he could have imagined it, their eyes met, and he saw something flicker in hers. Was it resentment? Sadness? Whatever it was, it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "I'll be right back." Her voice was crisp, detached. She turned on her heel and disappeared into the sea of diners. Ethan stared after her, his appetite suddenly gone. The conversation around him faded into static. He could still hear her voice, not just from moments ago, but from the past. Late-night talks, whispered dreams, the quiet laughter they once shared. The arguments, too, the ones that had grown sharper until their love crumbled under the weight of ambition and distance. Sophia's voice cut through the haze. "Ethan?" Earth to Ethan. He blinked, snapping back to the present. Sophia tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as she studied Ethan's distracted expression. "Are you okay? You've been staring off into space since we got here." He blinked, snapping out of his daze. "Sorry. Just thinking about work," he said too quickly, forcing a smile. "It's been a long week." Sophia's gaze lingered on him for a moment, but she let it go, turning her attention back to the menu. Ethan tried to do the same, but his mind refused to cooperate. Images of Lena flooded his thoughts, her laughing across their old kitchen table, her eyes bright with happiness as they danced in the rain during their honeymoon. Then, the memories shifted. Her tear-streaked face the night they admitted it was over, the way she packed her bags without looking back. He had told himself for years that their divorce was inevitable, that they had grown apart, that they wanted different things. But seeing her tonight, carrying a child, her child, he felt an unfamiliar ache settle in his chest. A movement at his side made him glance up. Lena had returned, placing their drinks on the table with practiced efficiency. "Are you ready to order?" Her voice was steady, revealing nothing. Sophia smiled, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. "I'll have the filet mignon, medium rare," she said, handing back the menu. Ethan hesitated, his gaze flickered to Lena's face, searching for something, anything, to anchor him in this moment. He finally placed his order, his voice quieter than usual. Lena scribbled it down and turned to leave, but Sophia suddenly leaned forward, curiosity flashing in her eyes. "You look familiar," she mused. "Have we met before?" For the first time that evening, Lena hesitated. Her grip on the notepad tightened slightly. She glanced at Ethan, a silent question in her gaze, before shaking her head. "I don't think so. I just started working here a few months ago." Ethan felt his throat tighten. The thought of Lena, a woman who once ran high-profile marketing campaigns for global brands, now waiting tables, was almost too much to process. And yet, she carried herself with the same quiet strength he had always admired. As she walked away, Sophia turned back to him, her brow furrowed. "Is it just me, or was that a little weird?" Ethan forced a chuckle. "You're imagining things. Let's focus on tonight." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were empty. His mind kept drifting back to Lena. Her tired eyes, the baby she carried, and the silent storm that lingered between them. How had she ended up here? And why, after all these years, did seeing her again feel like a second chance he never knew he needed? Sophia's laughter was light as she slipped her arm through Ethan's, tilting her head up to smile at him. "That was perfect. Thank you." Ethan nodded absently, his gaze drifting back toward the restaurant entrance. Inside, Lena was still moving through the evening rush, oblivious to the storm she had just stirred within him. As their car pulled away, he leaned back against the seat, staring at the city lights streaking past the window. The life he had built, structured, powerful, untouchable, suddenly felt like it had fractures running through its foundation. And in those fractures, he saw her, Lena, tired but strong, pregnant yet composed, a part of his past yet suddenly impossible to ignore. Beside him, Sophia scrolled through her phone, humming softly to herself. The celebratory mood of the evening had dulled, replaced by an uneasy silence that even the smooth hum of the car couldn't mask. "You're quiet," she remarked, glancing up at him. Ethan hesitated, caught off guard. "Just tired. It's been a big week." Sophia's brow furrowed, but she didn't press him further. "Try to relax. We'll be in the Maldives in a few days. You deserve a break after everything you've accomplished." He forced a smile, nodding, but his thoughts were miles away. Back in that restaurant. Back with Lena. The storm of emotions churned inside him, refusing to settle. He had spent years convincing himself that their divorce had been inevitable, that their lives had moved in different directions. But now, all of that certainty wavered in the presence of one undeniable truth. She was carrying a child, and he had no idea what that meant for either of them. Ethan hadn't always been this man. There had been a time when his ambition hadn't overshadowed everything else, when late nights weren't spent in boardrooms and his biggest concern wasn't the next acquisition or stock performance. Back then, he and Lena had been a team, two dreamers with nothing but belief in each other. They met in a small marketing firm where Lena's creativity lit up every project she touched. He had been drawn to her from the start, her passion, her laughter, the way she could turn the most ordinary moment into something extraordinary. But success had a way of shifting priorities. Ethan had thrown himself into his work, convinced that building his empire would justify all the sacrifices. Late nights turned into missed dinners, postponed vacations became canceled ones. And Lena, she had started wanting something different. Stability, a life beyond endless work, a future that wasn't dictated by profit margins. The night she walked away, he told himself it was for the best. They weren't aligned anymore. But now, as the city blurred past him, he wasn't so sure. For the first time in years, he wondered if losing her had been the biggest mistake of his life. Lena had always been the kind of woman who lit up a room the moment she walked in. Ethan had been captivated from the start by her passion, her sharp wit, the way she could make even the most mundane meetings feel exciting. Their connection had been effortless, something that felt rare and undeniable. In the beginning, everything between them had been easy. They weren't just partners in love. They were partners in life, building their future together with a shared sense of ambition. Lena had believed in him, in his vision, in the empire he was determined to create. And Ethan, in turn, had promised her that all their sacrifices would be worth it. But as his business grew, so did the space between them. Ethan had thrown himself into his work with relentless focus, convinced that success would justify everything: the late nights, the missed dinners, the vacations they never took. Lena, however, had started to crave something more. She wanted a life that felt real, something money couldn't buy. She wanted stability, deep connection, a family. Ethan could still hear her voice from that night, the night everything fell apart. They had been sitting in their high-rise apartment, the city lights sprawling beneath them. Lena had been quiet, her fingers tracing patterns along the rim of her glass before she finally looked up at him. "I can't do this anymore," she had said. Her voice had been steady, but her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Ethan had frowned, not understanding. "Do what?" "This," she gestured around them. "The penthouse, the fancy dinners, the constant waiting. I don't need any of it. I just need you." "But you're not here, Ethan. Not really." He had tried to argue, to tell her that everything he was doing was for them, for their future. But Lena had only shaken her head, sadness etched across her face. A week later, she was gone. Ethan had convinced himself it was for the best, that they wanted different things, that letting her go was the right choice instead of holding on to something that no longer worked. But now, sitting in the car with Sophia beside him, Lena's face fresh in his mind, he couldn't help but question everything. Had he been wrong? Had he been so consumed by his ambitions that he let go of the one thing that truly mattered? The car rolled to a stop in front of Sophia's building. Snapping him out of his thoughts, she turned to him, her smile expectant. "Are you coming up?" Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. "I've got some work to finish up tonight. Rain check?" Sophia's smile faltered, but she nodded, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "Don't work too hard. You're allowed to enjoy your success, you know." But for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't sure if success meant anything at all. Ethan watched as Sophia disappeared into her building before instructing the driver to take him home. The silence in the car was suffocating. His mind kept looping back to Lena, her tired eyes, the quiet strength in her posture, the undeniable swell of her belly. Who was the father? Was she happy? Was she okay? The questions followed him all the way to his penthouse, refusing to let go. The next morning he sat in his office, a sleek, minimalist space high above the city. A financial report lay open on his desk, but the words blurred in front of him. No matter how hard he tried to focus, his mind drifted back to last night. The way Lena had looked at him, calm, professional, but distant, as if she had built an impenetrable wall between them. And maybe she had. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. Sophia's voice was bright, full of excitement as she talked about their upcoming trip. Ethan responded automatically, his words smooth, practiced, but his heart wasn't in it. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked suddenly. "You sound distracted." "I'm fine," he said too quickly. "Just a lot on my plate right now." There was a pause, and then her tone shifted. "This isn't about last night, is it? About that waitress?" Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Sophia said lightly, but her words probed at something deeper. "You just went quiet after she came to our table, and I swear she looked familiar. Do you know her?" He hesitated, the weight of the truth pressing down on him. "She's someone I used to know, a long time ago." Sophia didn't press further, but the pause before her goodbye told him everything. The seed of doubt had been planted. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. His thoughts refused to settle. He saw Lena on their wedding day, radiant and full of hope. He saw her curled up on their couch, a book in her lap, laughing at something he had said. He saw her walking away, her shoulders straight but her steps heavy. And now he had seen her again, carrying a new life, wearing the exhaustion of someone who had been through far more than he could imagine. The past he had buried was suddenly clawing its way back to the surface, and for the first time in years, Ethan couldn't ignore it. A pull toward something unfinished, something unresolved, settled deep in his chest. For the first time in a long time, he realized he needed to understand what had gone wrong, and if there was still a place for him in the story he had abandoned. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that had settled deep in his chest. Since that night at the restaurant, his thoughts had been consumed by Lena, by the calm, guarded way she had spoken to him, by the flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. But most of all, he couldn't stop thinking about her pregnancy. The questions gnawed at him, growing louder with every passing day. He went through the motions at work, but meetings blurred into background noise. And even the congratulatory messages about his latest deal felt empty. His assistant, Julia, noticed but said nothing, maintaining her usual professionalism. Ethan appreciated it, but he knew he wasn't fooling anyone. By the end of the week, he couldn't take it anymore. He needed answers. With reluctance, he reached out to Madeline, an old mutual friend who had stayed in touch with Lena after the divorce. He hadn't spoken to her in years, their connection fading just as his and Lena's had. She answered after a few rings, her voice laced with amusement. "Ethan Carter. Now this is a surprise." He hesitated, running a hand over his face. "Did she mention seeing me?" "No," Madeline said, her tone shifting. "But I know she's been working at Amaretti. I assume that's where you ran into her?" "I did." Ethan swallowed. "She's pregnant, Madeline. Is she okay?" A pause stretched between them, and Ethan could practically hear her choosing her words carefully. "She's fine," she said at last, "but it hasn't been easy for her. She left her old job to start an interior design business. It went well for a while, but you know how unpredictable that industry can be. Eventually, she had to take the job at the restaurant to make ends meet." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Lena had always been ambitious, but in a different way than he was. While he had chased financial success, she had sought fulfillment, something creative, something real. And now she was struggling. "The baby," he said, his voice quieter. "Is the father around?" Madeline sighed. "No, it wasn't serious, and when she told him, he made it clear he wanted nothing to do with it. She's planning to raise the baby on her own." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He had been so focused on how seeing Lena again had affected him that he hadn't fully considered what she was facing. She wasn't just his ex-wife anymore. She was a woman about to become a mother, doing it alone while trying to stay afloat. Regret settled deep in his bones. He had walked away from her once, convincing himself it was for the best. But now, for the first time, he wondered if he had been wrong. Ethan could hardly bear the thought of Lena facing pregnancy alone, long hours at work, carrying the weight of it all without support. The image made his chest tighten. "She never reached out," he murmured, almost to himself. "She wouldn't," Madeline replied. "You know Lena, she's proud. And after everything that happened between you two, well, she's moved on, or at least, she's trying to." Their conversation ended, but Madeline's words lingered. Guilt wrapped around him like a heavy chain, tightening with every passing moment. Guilt for how their marriage had ended. Guilt for the choices he had made. Guilt for the life she was living now, without him. Ethan tried to lose himself in work, but his focus slipped through his fingers. Meetings blurred into meaningless discussions, reports sat unread on his desk, and every attempt to distract himself failed. Sophia noticed. At first she was patient, assuming his distance was due to post-launch exhaustion, but after a few days her frustration boiled over. During dinner at his penthouse she finally confronted him. "You're barely listening to me," she said, setting her wine glass down with a sharp clink. "I've been talking about our trip for 10 minutes, and you haven't said a word." Ethan looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, my mind's just been elsewhere." Sophia's gaze narrowed. "Yeah, I've noticed." She leaned forward, searching his face. "This is about her, isn't it? The waitress, Lena." His jaw tensed. "Sophia, it's not what you think." "Oh, isn't it?" she shot back. "Because ever since that night you've been distant, distracted." "I'm not stupid, Ethan. I can tell when someone else is on your mind." He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. "It's complicated. That's not an answer." Silence stretched between them before she finally asked the question he hadn't dared to ask himself. "Are you still in love with her?" The words hung heavy in the air. Was he? Ethan wasn't sure if love was the right word for what he felt, but the emotions stirred up by seeing Lena again, those were undeniable. The regret, the pull toward something unfinished. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. "I don't know." Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "At least you're honest." She stood, grabbing her purse and slinging it over her shoulder. "You need to figure out what you want, Ethan, and until you do, don't call me." She walked out, leaving him alone in the vast silence of his penthouse. He stared at the door for a long time, her words echoing in his mind. He should have felt angry, or at the very least, defensive. But all he felt was exhaustion, and deep down he knew Sophia wasn't wrong. Ethan needed to figure out what he wanted. The problem was, he wasn't sure if he could. The next morning he found himself scrolling through his phone, pausing on old pictures of Lena. One was from their first trip together, her smile bright and carefree as they stood on a windy cliffside, arms wrapped around each other. Another from a holiday party, her cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes shining with laughter. Each photo hit him with a rush of memories, both good and bad. How had everything gone so wrong? He thought about what Madeline had said, how Lena was too proud to ask for help, how she had always carried her struggles quietly. It was one of the things he had admired most about her, but now it felt like a wall between them. He wanted to help, to be there for her in some way. But would she even let him? The rest of the week passed in a haze. The life he had built, the business, the wealth, the success suddenly felt at odds with the past he had left behind. The questions haunted him. Was Lena truly okay? How was she managing everything alone? And the baby, her baby, what did it mean for him? By Sunday night, he had made up his mind. He couldn't keep living in this limbo, caught between what was and what could have been. If he wanted answers, if he wanted any chance at closure or maybe something more, he needed to speak to Lena himself. No more secondhand information. No more avoiding the truth. The next morning, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at his phone for what felt like an eternity, before finally taking a deep breath and dialing Amoretti. "Good afternoon," the hostess answered. "How can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with Lena Sullivan," Ethan said, keeping his voice steady even as his pulse quickened. A brief pause. "I'm sorry, but we don't typically interrupt staff during their shifts. Can I take a message?" Ethan hesitated, then spoke. "Tell her it's Ethan Carter, and that I'd like to see her." The hostess promised to pass the message along. As he hung up, something stirred inside him. Hope. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was there. And for the first time in years, he was ready to follow it. That evening, he stepped out of the car in front of Amoretti. The restaurant's golden glow illuminated the cool night air, the familiar hum of city life surrounding him. Same place, same atmosphere. But this time, he was alone. His excuse for coming back was weak, some fabricated business meeting he had casually mentioned to Julia. But the truth was, there was no meeting. He just couldn't shake the feeling that something inside was waiting for him. Something unfinished. Julia needed to see Isabel again. Inside, The restaurant was just as he remembered, elegant, filled with soft murmurs of conversation and the quiet clink of silverware. He spotted her almost instantly, moving between tables with practiced ease. Her black blouse and apron blended into the dimly lit backdrop of polished wood and crisp white tablecloths, but there was no mistaking her. Julian chose a small corner table, positioning himself where she wouldn't immediately notice him. When she finally approached, her neutral, professional expression shifted to something more guarded. Her steps slowed as she reached his table. "Julian," she said evenly, her voice carefully void of emotion, "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." His gaze flicked to the empty chair across from him before returning to her. "I was hoping we could talk." Her lips pressed into a thin line, hesitation clear in her posture. "I'm working." "I know," he said quickly, lowering his voice. "Just a few minutes, please." Isabel's eyes scanned the room, searching for her manager or another server who might step in. Then with a quiet sigh, she set her tray down at the edge of the table. "Fine," she said, "but make it quick." Julian gestured to the seat across from him, but she shook her head. "I can't sit. What do you want?" He leaned forward, voice dropping even lower. "I just wanted to see how you're doing, after everything. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I needed to know." Isabel crossed her arms, her posture rigid. "Why now, Julian? It's been years. You moved on. So did I." "I saw you, Isabel," he admitted, his voice quieter but no less intense. "That night. You were pregnant, working here, and I can't stop thinking about it." For a fleeting moment, something softened in her expression before she caught herself, her mask slipping back into place. "I'm fine," she said, her voice firm. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," he countered. "It's concern. I'm not trying to make this harder for you, I swear, but you look tired, stressed, and if there's any way I can help—" "Help," she cut him off, a trace of bitterness creeping into her voice. "Julian, I don't need you swooping in to save me. I've been managing just fine without you." "I know you have," he said gently. "But you don't have to do everything alone." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't immediately reply. Instead, she glanced toward the kitchen, her body tense, as if debating whether to walk away. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders sagging ever so slightly. For the first time that night, Julian thought, maybe, just maybe, there was still something between them worth saving. "Noah, I don't need your help." But there was no bite to Isabel's words. She didn't push him away, didn't immediately walk off, and that alone told him she wasn't as indifferent as she wanted to appear. "Fine. 10 minutes, she said, her voice lower now. "Meet me out back when I finish my shift." Relief tightened in Noah's chest as he nodded. He watched as she turned and walked away, her posture straight, her pace brisk. He wondered if he had just pushed too far. The alley behind the restaurant was quieter than he had expected, the usual sounds of the city fading into the background. Isabel emerged a few minutes later, her apron gone, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders. She looked different under the glow of the streetlights, less guarded, more like herself. For a moment, Noah was transported back to a time when seeing her like this was an everyday occurrence. She leaned against the brick wall, arms crossed, eyes fixed on him. "Talk." Noah hesitated, searching for the right words. "I heard about your interior design business." From Madeline. Isabel's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "I also heard it's been challenging," he continued. "And that you're doing all of this on your own. I can't imagine how hard that math." She exhaled, some of the tension in her shoulders easing. "It's not easy," she admitted, "but it's mine. After the divorce, I needed something that felt like mine, so I left the corporate world and started taking on small projects. Word spread, and for a while, it was great. But then the market shifted. Her fingers brushed over her stomach, an unconscious gesture that caught Noah's attention. "When I found out I was pregnant, I had to pick up shifts here to cover the bills," she continued. "It's not glamorous, but it pays." Noah's gaze dropped to her hand, resting protectively over her belly. "And the baby's father?" His voice was quieter now. Isabel's lips pressed into a thin line. "He's not in the picture." It wasn't serious, and when I told him, he made it clear he wanted nothing to do with it. So it was just her, alone. The thought hit Noah harder than he expected. Isabel had always been strong, but imagining her facing single motherhood on her own made something ache inside of him. "You shouldn't have to do this alone," he said, his voice low. Isabel, I know I messed up. I know I let you down. And I can't undo that. But if there's anything I can do now, anything at all, I want to help. She looked at him for a long moment, something flickering in her expression. For the first time, Noah let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a second chance for them. Julian watched her closely, his chest tightening at the unreadable look on Isabel's face. Why, Julian? She asked, her voice quieter now. Why do you care all of a sudden? Because I never stopped caring, he admitted, his words barely above a whisper. I just didn't know how to show it, and now I don't want to make the same mistakes again. For the first time that evening, Isabel's guarded expression faltered. A flicker of something softer passed through her eyes, but then she shook her head. I don't know if I can trust you, not after everything. You don't have to decide that now, he said quickly. But let me help. Just as a friend, I can connect you with people who can grow your business, make sure you don't have to rely on this place to get by. She hesitated, her hands still resting protectively over her stomach. Then, after a long pause, she gave a small nod. Okay. But only because Julian smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that he hadn't felt in years. For as they stood there, the city's quiet hum surrounding them, some-eyed murmur. But it was of that night, for years, Isabel had. Now he wasn't so sure. The image of her standing in that alley, tired but unbroken, wouldn't leave his mind. She was fighting for something bigger than herself, something real. And what was he fighting for? Another zero in his bank account? Another glowing headline in the business section? For the first time in years, Julian wondered if he had been chasing the wrong things all along. The next morning, everything felt off. His usual coffee tasted bitter. His meetings dragged on longer than necessary. Even the congratulatory messages from the board about his latest success felt empty. His assistant, Julia, noticed. Are you okay, Mr. Carter? She asked cautiously, placing a file on his desk. You've been distracted lately. Julian looked up, startled by the observation. I'm fine, Julia, he said automatically. Then, after a beat, he exhaled. Just a lot on my mind. For the first time, he wasn't sure if his life was as perfect as he had always convinced himself it was. Ethan watched as Julia hesitated before nodding and leaving the room. But the doubt in her expression was clear. She didn't believe him. He didn't blame her. He didn't believe himself either. That evening, Sophia arrived at his penthouse unannounced, the sharp click of her stilettos echoing against the marble floor. She was, as always, impeccably dressed, her makeup flawless, her confidence unwavering. But there was an edge to her voice as she greeted him. I've been giving you space, she began, her tone smooth but calculated, but I think it's time we talked. Ethan set his glass of whiskey down on the coffee table, bracing himself. About what? About whatever's going on with you. She moved gracefully to the couch, crossing her legs. You've been distant, distracted, and I think I know why. He remained silent, waiting. It's Lena, isn't it? Sophia's eyes narrowed slightly. Ever since that night at the restaurant, you've been different. Don't try to deny it. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm not going to deny it, he admitted. I saw her, and it brought back a lot. She's going through a tough time, and I want to help. Sophia's laugh was sharp and humorless. Help? She repeated. She's your ex-wife, Ethan. Whatever she's dealing with is not your problem. You're with me now. I know that, he said, his voice steady but firm. But I can't just ignore it. She's someone I cared about. Someone I still care about in some way. Sophia's expression darkened. So what? She snapped. You're gonna play the hero? Throw some money at her and ease your guilt? It's not about money. He stood, frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. It's about doing the right thing, something I didn't do enough of when we were together. Sophia rose to her feet as well, her heels bringing her nearly level with him. And what about us, Ethan? Are you just going to throw this away because your ex suddenly reappeared? He met her gaze, the weight of the moment settling between them. I don't think this has been working for a while, Sophia, he said finally. We've been going through the motions, but there's no real connection. Not like there should be. For the first time, her carefully composed mask cracked, but only for a moment before she recovered. I see, she said, her voice turning cold. So that's it, then? He nodded, his chest heavy but certain. I think it's best for both of us. Sophia grabbed her purse, her movements sharp and deliberate. "You'll regret this," she said as she strode toward the door. "You always do." The door slammed behind her, leaving Ethan alone in the vast, empty silence of his penthouse. He exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his chest ease, though guilt still lingered. He didn't regret his decision, but that didn't mean it was easy. Over the next few weeks, Adrian found himself thinking less about work and more about Maya. Discreetly, he reached out to a few trusted contacts in the design industry, putting in good words for her and quietly directing potential clients her way. He even arranged for her to meet with a financial advisor, ensuring she had the support she needed to grow her business. He didn't tell Maya about any of it. She was proud. He knew she would never accept the help if she thought it was charity. Instead, he let the opportunities find her naturally, hoping she would take them without suspicion. Their interactions at the restaurant became more frequent, but always brief. Maya remained light-hearted but cautious, her guard still firmly in place. Adrian never pushed, but he made it clear. If she ever needed anything, he was there. One evening after her shift, they sat in the quiet alley behind the restaurant. The night air was cool, and for a while neither of them spoke. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Helping me, I mean. You don't owe me anything." Adrian met her gaze, his expression open, honest. "I'm not doing it because I owe you," he said. "I'm doing it because I care, and because I want to." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any sign of an ulterior motive. Finally, she gave a small nod, a hesitant smile forming at the corners of her lips. "Thank you." Warmth spread through him, something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about helping Maya. It was about rebuilding something he had lost long ago. Trust, connection, meaning. As the weeks turned into months, her business began to thrive. Her stress eased, and though she still worked part-time at the restaurant, her focus shifted back to what she loved. Adrian saw the change in her, how she seemed lighter, happier, even as her pregnancy progressed. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Helping Maya wasn't about making up for the past. It was about building something real, and he was ready to see where it would take them. When he stepped into her boutique one afternoon, the scent of fresh paint and polished wood greeted him. The space was alive with color, fabric swatches draped over chairs, mood boards pinned to the walls, plants tucked into every corner. Her design studio was small but filled with personality, just like her. "Hey," she greeted him, glancing up from her desk where she was arranging tile samples. Her smile was cautious but genuine, a far cry from the guarded look she used to give him. For the first time, Adrian let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a second chance at love. Ethan watched as Olivia studied him, her expression softer than it had been when they first reconnected. "What brings you by?" she asked. "I was in the neighborhood," he replied casually, though the truth was he had gone out of his way to check in on her. "Wanted to see how things are going." She nodded and gestured for him to sit. "Busy, which is a good problem to have. The new clients you mentioned came through, and they've been keeping me on my toes." Ethan settled into a chair, glancing around the room. "It's amazing to see this place come together. I knew you'd make it work." Olivia tilted her head, her smile touched with skepticism. "I'm still figuring things out. It's not exactly smooth sailing, but it's mine, and that makes it worth it." He admired her resilience, the quiet determination that had always been her strength. "If there's anything else you need, don't hesitate to ask. I mean it." "I know," she said softly, meeting his gaze. "And I appreciate it. I really do." Over the weeks, their conversations had grown easier. The walls between them were slowly coming down, though neither of them rushed it. Ethan had been careful, respecting her independence while still finding small ways to support her. He never pushed, never asked for more than she was ready to give, and that patience seemed to be paying off. They started spending more time together, not intentionally at first, but in the natural rhythm of their overlapping lives. He'd stop by her studio, sometimes offering feedback on her projects, sometimes just listening when she needed to vent. Other times they'd grab a coffee, their conversations light and easy, filled with laughter that reminded them both of simpler times. One evening, after closing up her studio, they took a walk through a quiet park nearby. The night air was cool, and for a long time they walked in silence, comfortable in each other's presence. Then, Ethan spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about the past." Olivia glanced at him, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What about it?" "About us," he exhaled, his voice tinged with regret. "About the ways I let you down. I was so focused on building my career that I lost sight of what really mattered. I took you for granted, and I'm sorry." She slowed her steps, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. "You don't have to apologize, Ethan. We both made mistakes." "I know," he said, stopping to face her. "But I should have listened to you more. You wanted something real, something I couldn't see at the time." His voice softened. "I realize now how much I missed." Olivia turned to look at him, something unspoken lingering between them. For the first time, Ethan let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a second chance at love. "Because I was too stubborn to stop and appreciate what we had." Mason met Ava's gaze, his voice quiet but certain. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "People change," she said finally, her tone thoughtful. "And I think you've changed too." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that settled deep in his chest. He nodded, a small, hopeful smile tugging at his lips. "I'm trying," he admitted. "And I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm here for you. For you and the baby." Ava's lips curved into a softer smile. "Thank you, Mason. That means a lot." As they continued walking, their conversation drifted to lighter topics, but the moment lingered between them, a quiet, significant step forward. Inspired by Ava's passion for helping local artisans and small businesses, Mason found himself rethinking his own approach to success. He reached out to contacts in the city, pitching initiatives to support grassroots entrepreneurship. His company launched a grant program for emerging designers and hosted events to showcase local talent. When he mentioned the projects to Ava, she was hesitant, wary of becoming the focus of his efforts. "This isn't about me, is it?" she asked one evening as they sat in her studio, reviewing a proposal he had drafted. "It's inspired by you," he clarified. "But it's not just about you. There's so much talent in this community, and I want to help foster that. You reminded me how important it is to invest in people, not just profits." She held his gaze, her expression softening. "That's really amazing, Mason. I'm proud of you." The words hit him harder than he expected, filling him with quiet warmth. He hadn't realized how much her opinion still mattered to him. Until now. "Thank you," he said simply. As the months passed, Ava's trust in Mason grew, and with it, something new emerged between them. It wasn't the intense, all-consuming connection they had once shared, but something steadier, built on mutual respect and understanding. Mason cherished it, knowing how fragile it was, and determined not to take it for granted. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in her studio, him moving furniture while she arranged a new display, Ava paused and looked at him. "You've really changed," she said, her voice quiet but sure. Mason turned to her, meeting her gaze with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. Maybe this wasn't just about making amends. Maybe, just maybe, they were finding their way back to something real. A second chance at love. Sophia's voice carried a mix of surprise and something else, admiration maybe. Ethan set down the chair he'd been carrying, brushing his hands off. "I had to. Losing you was a wake-up call I didn't know I needed." Sophia smiled, a warmth in her expression that hadn't been there before. Maybe some good came out of it after all? Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to fade. It wasn't a declaration, not even a promise, but it was something, an acknowledgement of how far they had come, and the possibilities still ahead. As they returned to their tasks, the air between them felt lighter. The bridge they had been building, once fragile, was growing stronger with every step they took together. Neither of them knew what the future held, but for the first time in years, they both felt ready to face it, side by side. An ordinary afternoon. Ethan's phone buzzed on his desk. He glanced at the screen, expecting another message from his assistant or a client. But instead, an unfamiliar number flashed across the display. Something about it made his chest tighten. "Hello?" he answered, his voice cautious. "Ethan, it's Madeline." The hurried voice on the other end sent a chill down his spine. "Sophia's been taken to the hospital. She went into labor early. She's asking for you." His breath caught. Is she okay? What happened? She's stable, but they're monitoring her closely. The baby's coming sooner than expected, and she's scared. She didn't know who else to call. Ethan was already on his feet, grabbing his keys and heading for the door. Which hospital? Madeline told him, and he didn't waste another second. He called for his driver, but couldn't wait, choosing to drive himself instead. The city blurred past him, his focus narrowing to a single thought. Sophia. When he arrived at the hospital, the sharp scent of antiseptic and the quiet urgency of medical staff surrounded him. His pulse pounded as he approached the front desk. Sophia Reed, he said, his voice tight. Where is she? The nurse directed him to the maternity ward, and he rushed down the sterile hallway, his polished shoes echoing off the tile floor. Reaching her room, he paused for just a second, drawing a deep breath before stepping inside. Sophia lay in the hospital bed, her face pale, damp with sweat. Strands of hair stuck to her forehead, but her eyes, though tired, were sharp, filled with a mix of fear and determination. When she looked up and saw him, relief softened her expression. You came, she murmured, her voice weak but steady. Ethan moved closer, his voice certain. Of course I did. For the first time he understood. This wasn't just about making amends. This was their second chance at love. Julian crossed the room in an instant, standing beside her. I'm here, he said, his voice steady. Isabel reached for his hand, squeezing tightly as another contraction tore through her. Julian felt a pang of helplessness, watching her body tremble with effort. The baby's early, she whispered when the pain subsided, her voice shaking. They said it's not ideal, but we'll be okay, right? Julian didn't hesitate. You will be, he said firmly. You're the strongest person I know. Isabel, you've got this. Her lips twitched into a faint smile, but she didn't let go of his hand. For the first time, Julian saw her vulnerability laid bare, and something inside him shifted. She wasn't just the woman he had once loved. She was a fighter, a survivor, and now the hours dragged on, each contraction bringing her closer to delivery. Julian never left her side. He held her hand, whispered words of encouragement, and silently marveled at her strength. Nurses moved in and out, adjusting monitors and offering updates, but Julian barely noticed. His entire world had shrunk to Isabel and the life they were about to bring into the world. When the time finally came, the room transformed into a whirlwind of movement. Doctors and nurses worked quickly, their voices calm but urgent. Julian stood by Isabel, his fingers locked around hers as she pushed through the pain. Her cries filled the air, raw and desperate, but she never let go. Her grip tightened, nails digging into his skin, and Julian welcomed it, anything to share even a fraction of what she was enduring. You're doing amazing, he told her, his voice steady despite the chaos. I'm right here. Watching her fight for their baby, her baby, Julian felt something inside him shift again. Then a sharp cry split the room. Time seemed to stop. The doctor lifted a tiny wriggling form, announcing, "It's a boy." Isabel collapsed back against the bed, her face etched with exhaustion and relief. Julian turned to her, his chest tightening with something deep, something overwhelming. The nurse placed the baby in her arms, and tears slipped down Isabel's cheeks as she gazed at her son for the first time. "He's perfect," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Julian leaned in, his eyes locked on the tiny bundle in her arms. The baby's face was scrunched up, his cries softening as Isabel held him close. "He is," Julian murmured, his throat tight. For a long time they simply existed in the moment. The chaos of the delivery room faded, leaving only the three of them. A second chance at love didn't always come in expected ways, but as Julian looked at Isabel and their son, he knew this was exactly where he was meant to be. Noah pulled the chair closer to Amelia's hospital bed, his hand resting lightly over hers. "You were incredible," he said softly. "I've never seen anything like that." Amelia let out a tired laugh, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment. "I didn't think I could do it. Not without you." Her words lingered in the air, filling Noah with a mix of gratitude and longing. He took a slow breath, trying to steady the emotions welling up inside him. "Amelia?" he began, his voice low. "There's something I need to say." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "What is it?" He hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Watching you today, seeing you bring a new life into the world, it made me realize how much I've been missing. "You're incredible, Amelia. You always have been." He swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "And I think I've always loved you." Her eyes widened slightly, lips parting in surprise. "I know I don't deserve another chance," he continued, his heart pounding, "but I want you to know that I'm here. For you, for the baby, for whatever you need. I'll be whatever you want me to be. Friend, co-parent, anything. The choice is yours." Amelia studied him, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, Noah feared he had said too much, that he had pushed her away. Then her fingers tightened around his, and a faint smile curved her lips. "Noah," she said softly, "you've changed. I can see it. And I think we can figure this out together." Relief and hope surged through him, his chest tightening with the weight of her words. He nodded, unable to speak, and simply held her hand. The nurse returned with the baby, carefully placing him into Amelia's arms. Noah leaned closer, his breath catching as he looked at the tiny face that now held so much meaning. A new beginning, a second chance for all of them. At that moment, he knew he would do whatever it took to be the man they both deserved. The following weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights and quiet moments filled with new life. Noah visited Amelia and their son, whom she named Henry, almost every day. He marveled at how quickly the tiny boy became the center of their world, how effortlessly his presence made the cracks in their past feel smaller, more distant. Every coo, every stretch of his tiny arms seemed to stitch them back together in ways Noah hadn't thought possible. Amelia, too, seemed to be softening. The guarded look she once wore around him had faded, replaced by something gentler, something trusting. They had shared difficult conversations since that night in the hospital, conversations that forced them to confront the past. But for the first time in years, Noah wasn't looking back. He was looking forward, to their future, to confront the mistakes of their past. But in every exchange, Julian saw a glimmer of hope in Ava's eyes, a cautious willingness to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Julian sat on Ava's couch with baby Theo cradled in his arms. The baby had just fallen asleep, his tiny hand curled around Julian's finger. The sight filled Julian with quiet awe. "You're a natural," Ava said softly, settling beside him with a cup of tea. Julian glanced at her, warmth in his expression. "I had a good teacher," she smiled, her gaze lingering on him longer than usual. "Thank you," she murmured, "for being here, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "This is where I want to be." Ava looked down at her tea, fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she admitted, "about what we went through, about who we are now." Julian's chest tightened. "And?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with anticipation. She met his gaze, her expression open and honest. "I see how much you've changed, Julian. You've become someone who listens, someone who cares about more than just work. And I think I want to see where this can go. If we can build something new." Relief and joy surged through him, but he kept his response measured, not wanting to overwhelm her. "I'd like that," he said, "more than anything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight of their history slowly giving way to the possibilities of the future. In the following months, Julian began making real changes in his life. For years, he had poured everything into Carter Enterprises, convinced that his worth was tied to his success. But now, with Theo's tiny fingers wrapped around his heart and Ava's cautious smiles filling his days, he saw things differently. One morning, at a board meeting, Julian made a decision that shocked his colleagues. He announced that he would be stepping back from the day-to-day operations of the company. He named his most trusted executive as interim CEO, explaining that he wanted to focus on his personal life and invest his time in projects that aligned with his newfound values. The room was stunned, but Julian felt nothing but clarity. For the first time in years, he wasn't operating on autopilot. He was choosing to live with intention, to prioritize love. Ava and Theo weren't just his second chance at happiness, they were his second chance at love. What truly mattered. Noah's transition wasn't just professional, it was personal too. He moved out of his sprawling penthouse and into a more modest home near Amelia's neighborhood, making it easier to spend time with her and Theo. His days became filled with small joys. Late-night feedings, quiet afternoons in the park, an evening spent sharing stories with Amelia while Theo dozed between them. Amelia, in turn, began to trust him more deeply. She saw how committed he was, not just to Theo, but to the fragile, growing connection between them. They weren't rushing anything. They were rebuilding, step by step, brick by careful brick. One crisp autumn afternoon, they hosted a small gathering at Amelia's home to celebrate Theo turning 3 months old. It wasn't extravagant, just a few close friends, a simple spread of food, and the kind of laughter that made a house feel like home. Madeline was there, of course, along with a few of Amelia's clients who had become friends. Even Noah's assistant, Claire, stopped by, bringing a handmade blanket for Theo that earned her a rare, genuine smile from Amelia. Noah stood near the corner of the living room, watching it all unfold. Amelia was laughing with Madeline by the kitchen, her face lit with happiness. Theo was being fussed over by Claire and one of Amelia's clients, his tiny hands waving in the air. The room felt alive, with warmth, with love, and for the first time in years, Noah realized he was exactly where he was meant to be. Across the room, Amelia caught his eye and smiled, a soft, knowing look that sent warmth flooding through him. He crossed the room, standing beside her as she finished her conversation. "This is nice," he said, his voice low. "It is," Amelia agreed, glancing around at the people filling her home. "It feels right." Noah nodded, his gaze settling on her. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this, of your life again." Amelia turned to him fully, her expression serious yet tender. "You've earned it, Noah," she said simply. "You're not the same man you were before, and I'm glad you're here." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of something much bigger. Forgiveness, hope. Noah reached for her hand, his touch light but certain. "I'll keep earning it every day." Amelia squeezed his hand, her smile widening. "I know you will." As the evening wound down and the last of their guests said their goodbyes, Noah found himself standing alone in the living room, watching Theo sleep peacefully in his bassinet. For the first time, he wasn't looking back at what they had lost. He was looking forward to everything they had yet to build. Their second chance at love had already begun. Cradling a drowsy Theo in her arms, Amelia appeared beside Noah. Her presence was warm and steady, a quiet reassurance. "Looks like someone's ready for bed," she murmured, brushing a gentle hand over Theo's soft curls. "Yeah," Noah replied, his voice soft. "He had a big day." Amelia sat beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. They stayed like that for a while, the room filled with nothing but the sound of Theo's peaceful breaths. "I think we're going to be okay," she whispered, her voice carrying quiet conviction. Noah turned his head and pressed a kiss to the top of her hair, his heart full. "I know we are," he said. And in that moment, surrounded by love and second chances, Noah realized he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Not success, not wealth, but a life filled with purpose, connection, and the people who mattered most. Noah's journey wasn't just about rekindling a lost love. It was about rediscovering what truly mattered. Through forgiveness, growth, and the courage to take a leap of faith, he and Amelia found their way back to each other. Not as the people they once were, but as stronger, wiser versions of themselves. Together they built a life defined not by material success, but by love, family, and the promise of second chances. Because that's the beauty of life. It's never too late to change. Never too late to make amends. Never too late to prioritize what truly matters. Whether it's repairing a relationship, chasing a dream, or simply being present for the people we care about, every step forward is an opportunity to create a new beginning. If this emotional love story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. What did you think of Noah and Amelia's journey? Let us know in the comments. And if you're ready for more heartwarming tales of love, resilience, and redemption, stay tuned. There's plenty more to come. See you in the next story. 23. Cradling a drowsy Theo in her arms, Amelia appeared beside Noah. Her presence was warm and steady, a quiet reassurance. "Looks like someone's ready for bed," she murmured, brushing a gentle hand over Theo's soft curls. "Yeah," Noah replied, his voice soft. "He had a big day." Amelia sat beside him, resting her head against his shoulder. They stayed like that for a while, the room filled with nothing but the sound of Theo's peaceful breaths. "I think we're going to be okay," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet conviction. Noah turned his head and pressed a kiss to the top of her hair, his heart full. "I know we are," he said. As he held Theo close and felt Amelia's warmth beside him, Noah realized something he had been too blind to see before. He had spent years chasing success, believing that his worth was measured by achievements and wealth. But none of that had ever filled the emptiness inside him. Happiness wasn't found in status or possessions. It was found in love, in the quiet moments, in the people who truly mattered. Life had given him a second chance at love, and this time, he wasn't going to waste it. His journey with Amelia had been one of growth, forgiveness, and trust. They weren't the same people they had once been, and that was a good thing. They had changed, they had learned, and now they were building something stronger, something real. Together, they were creating a life not defined by the past, but by the future they were choosing to embrace. And as Noah looked down at his son, a peaceful warmth settled in his chest. Because in this moment, he knew, he finally had everything he had ever needed.